The Lord is our God. The Lord of the universe, who holds the planets in his hands, is our God. He's here. And he is one. There's a profound oneness to all things in the universe. And God represents that unitary consciousness. Behind the many is the one. And it's such a profound insight that they cover their eyes, as God here covers Moses' eyes. So it's a marvelous image of God taking on human form, showing his back but not his front. And in a minute, we're going to see what the ways of God are. He's revealing his ways, but not his totality. Chapter 34. The Lord said to Moses, "Carve 2 tablets of stone like the first." Now the first tablets, which Moses broke, God carved and wrote on it. Here God will write on them again, but he doesn't carve them. Because through our sin, we make a little bit of a separation between us and God. If we want the commandments, man is going to have to carve them himself. "Carve 2 tablets of stone like the first, and I will inscribe, I, God, upon the tablets the words that were on the first tablets, which you shattered. Be ready by morning, and in the morning come up to Mount Sinai." So Moses is always going up and down. "And present yourself there to me as you did once before. On the top of the mountain, man goes up, God comes down, meet between heaven and earth. No one else shall come up with you, and no one else shall be seen anywhere on the mountain. Neither shall the flocks and the herds graze at the foot of the mountain." Moses is the intermediary. Verse 4. "So Moses carved 2 tablets of stone, like the first, and early in the morning he went up onto Mount Sinai, as the Lord had commanded him, taking the 2 stone tablets with him. And the Lord came down," Moses up, God down, "in a cloud." The cloud of unknowing, as that was a medieval book of religion, the cloud of unknowing. Not knowing God, but unknowing, because this is a mystery. God is always the mystery of the awesome, inspiring. That's why I object to the common use of the term awesome. You go to a restaurant and you say, "I'll have the cocktail here." It's awesome. It's not awesome. God is awesome. Cocktail may be good, but it's not awesome. So, God is in a cloud. Verse 6. Middle of verse 7. 5. "The Lord came down in a cloud. He stood with him there and proclaimed the name of the Lord." So God is about to say something, standing with Moses. As he passed by, Moses is in the cleft of the rock. Now there's a lot going on here, so let's not forget the overall image. He's in the cleft of the rock. God will pass him by, cover his eyes, so he shouldn't look upon the face, the glory of God, and then he'll see the back of God. But as God does this, he is reciting the divine attributes of how God relates to us. "He stood with him there and proclaimed the name of the Lord." That is, God himself did. And this is who God is as far as we're concerned. "The Lord passed before him and proclaimed." In Hebrew, it's Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed V'Yemet. The Lord, a God compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in kindness and faithfulness, extending kindness to the 1,000th generation, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin. Yet he does not remit all punishment, but visits the iniquity of parents upon children and children's children upon the 3rd and 4th generations. Now that, as I've said before, is a problem for modern Americans. We have such a great sense of fairness. Is it fair that children and grandchildren inherit the sins or suffer for the sins of their parents? No, but they do. So it's not an ought statement the way things should be, it's the way things are. Bad parents can mess up their children, who will then mess up their children. And 3rd and 4th generation, because that's the number of generations anyone is ever likely to see. Beyond that, you won't be here to see the 5th generation. But unfortunately, if you mess up your parenting job, you live to see children and grandchildren and even great-grandchildren suffer. But it's compared to the 1,000th generation that God forgives. So it's a matter of forgiveness being much greater than the inheritance of problems. God is compassionate, gracious, slow to anger, abounding in kindness, faithfulness. He's reliable to keep his promises. I mean, I certainly know that. The very existence of the Jews today, 3,000 years after this, if that doesn't prove that God keeps his promises, I don't know what does. And then the restoration of Israel after 2,000 years of exile. I mean, such a thing has never happened in the history of the world. But he deals with Israel in a unique way. All right, so all of those descriptions are relational. That's how God shows us his grace and mercy and compassion. Is that the essence of God? The glory of God? No. That's what he chooses to reveal to us. And we can count on that. Absolutely count on it. It's a true revelation, but it isn't a complete revelation. Because the infinite can never reveal itself fully to the finite, any more than I can get all the water in the world into this little glass. But this is truly water, and it will nourish me if I drink it and keep me alive. And God's revelation will nourish me and keep me alive, and it's good enough. It's enough. Look at Moses' reaction. God has said, I will grant your first wish and show you my ways. I've just done that in this recitation. But I will not grant your second wish because you die. You couldn't contain it. And Moses says, okay, I accept it. Verse 8. Moses doesn't say, well, wait a minute. I asked for your glory. And God, he doesn't argue with him. He understands what God is saying. It's the difference between appearance and reality, which is a very important difference. It's like the infinite-finite distinction. What do we see in the world? We see appearances. What is the ultimate reality? We're not given to know that. We can never know that. We can know a little more if we look through a certain kind of microscope. Suppose we had a microscope that would reveal the atomic structure of this table. We say this table is solid. That's the appearance. But the atomic theory, which everyone accepts today, tells us it's made up of atoms, protons and neutrons, and little things flying around. And the spaces between them is actually greater than the particles. So is it solid? Not in any ultimate sense, no. It's solid in our experience. And God has just said, in your experience, I am gracious, compassionate, forgiving, all of that. That doesn't mean you know the totality of God. Any more than if you're on a ship on the high seas and you see an iceberg, what you know it's just the tip of an underground mountain. 99% of it you don't see. But this is real enough, you better keep your ship away from it. So the blessings God gives us, good enough. Moses hastened to bow low to the ground in homage. He doesn't argue anymore. And he said, if I have gained your favor, O Lord, pray. He's not asking to see the essence of God anymore, but he's saying, let the Lord go in our midst, even though we're a stiff-necked people. Like all people, we're sinners. Pardon our iniquity and our sin, and take us for your own. He's trying still to appeal to God, who has revealed his ways. Oh, if you're compassionate and gracious, don't just send an angel. You come with us. Verse 10. And God said, I hereby make a berit, a covenant. Before all your people, I will work such wonders as have not been wrought in all the earth or in any nation. And all the people who are with you shall see how awesome are the Lord's deeds, which I will perform for you. And that's what I was just talking about. If you look at the history of the Jews, you see the most remarkable evidence of the hand of God. If you look for it, you'll find it. The very fact that we still exist is, against all odds, is an incredible miracle. And now have a nation again. So, who would have expected it? Well, the Jews believed in it. No one else did. But here it's God's promise, and that's why then I believe that the Jews will be here for until as long as the heavens are over the earth, regardless of what. It says in the Bible, 1,000 may fall at your side, or 6 million, or 10,000 at your right hand, or I would add 6 million died just a generation ago, and yet here we still are. So we have the promises. We stand, as the Christians also say, we stand on the promises of God. And I would say that both Jews and Christians can be confident in those promises. Because now you have various branches of Israel. It's not just the Jews, it's the Christians. I think Israel today has two branches, the Jewish branch and the Christian branch, and his promises hold for all of us. But here they are. I'm going to do things with you that the world has never seen before. And in fact, that's exactly what's happened. Before finishing Exodus, and that's the sealing of the covenant. You know, it's like a marriage. God and Israel are married. And in Hosea, it says, you Israelites are the bride of God. And every morning when an Israelite, an Orthodox Jew prays, he uses what's called tefillin, which are little leather boxes with prayers in them. And he binds one to his arm opposite his heart to consecrate his heart to God, and then goes 7 times with a strap around. It looks very peculiar, but if you understand what he's doing, it's very moving. He makes 7 circlets of his arm with a leather strap, and then arranges the strap on the back on his hand to form a shin, Shaddai, the Eternal One, and finishes off by putting it around his wedding ring finger. And as he does it, he says, I will betroth thee unto me in righteousness, and you shall know the Lord. That's from the prophet Hosea. So every morning an Orthodox Jew marries God. Israel is the bride of God. What a powerful idea. We're also the children of God, but in Hosea he talks about a marriage. Now, if this is sealing a marriage, I will make a covenant with you unlike any other people. Where is the wedding contract? In Judaism, you sign the ketubah, the wedding contract. And does the bride give it to the husband, or the husband give it to the bride? I think the husband gives it to the bride. And it stipulates the terms of the marriage. Well, where is it here? It's the 10 Commandments, written by the finger of God. That's the marriage contract between God and Israel. And Jews and Christians can stand on those promises and those commandments. Before we leave Exodus, let us skip to chapter 34, verse 28. So, we've seen the covenant sealed between God and Israel. We've seen the second set of tablets inscribed. Chapter 34, verse 28. And Moses was there with the Lord for 40 days and 40 nights. Jesus will do the same thing, 40 days and 40 nights. He ate no bread and drank no water. Jesus fasted in the desert too. And he wrote down on the tablets the terms of the covenant, the 10 Commandments. Now that's interesting because it said earlier that God would write it. Here it says Moses wrote it. I don't think the writers are quite clear as to who wrote the second set of commandments. Was God so annoyed with over the golden calf situation that he cut the tablets, but Moses cut the tablets, but God did write them again? Or was he so annoyed that Moses had to both cut them and write them? The first were made with the finger of God, the second with the finger of Moses. Well, it's not clear. Seems to me a contradiction, but I can't figure it out. Verse 29. So Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the 2 tablets, the new tablets. And as Moses came down from the mountain bearing the 2 tablets of the pact, Moses was not aware that the skin of his face was radiant, since God had spoken with him. So his face is shining. And I've said that I saw Billy Graham once in a dark place, and his face seemed to be shining. There are some people who seem to have that gift. But Moses had seen God, and his face will be radiant for the rest of his life. Yes. All right. Now that is as much as Exodus as we're going to do. It's just about over. And we're going to skip Leviticus, except let's take a look at chapter 11. Now, the reason we can skip it safely, as far as this class is concerned, is, as I've said, this is an ongoing historical adventure story. Well, a great deal of theology and religious insight, obviously, but it's a really great narrative. But it stops in Leviticus, and it gives us the excruciatingly detailed description of how the Israelites worshipped by offering sacrifices and all this and that, and very interesting to scholars, but really you would find it less so. If you want to look at it yourself, you're welcome to it. Leviticus is not easy to slog through for a layman. So let's just skip to chapter 11, because you might be interested in the laws of kashrut, the kosher laws. I observe them, many Jews do, and you find them in the Bible. Everything in Judaism is based on some verse in the Bible or an interpretation of a verse. The first kosher law goes back to Noah in the book of Genesis, where God says, after Noah saves the animals, I gave Adam and Eve fruits and vegetables to eat. So presumably everybody was a vegetarian. And even tigers and lions were sitting around eating carrots and lettuce. Because what's the point? Everyone was a vegetarian from Adam and Eve to Noah, because the ideal is to live without doing harm, without causing pain, without killing anything. It is possible to be a vegan. And if you go, there's a new kosher vegan restaurant in Charleston, a few blocks from here, called Marty's Place, named after Martin Perlmutter, who's the head of the Jewish Studies program. And they opened this kosher facility because 10% of the college students at the College of Charleston are Jewish. And they would feel more welcome, I assumed, and happier if they have a kosher facility, and that's certainly true. We had the grand opening. I tell you, the food's very good. They have, you wouldn't think cauliflower could ever be something people would run over to eat, but they have some kind of a spicy sauce on this cauliflower, and it's really outstanding. Gee, I really want some even right now. The best way to deal with vegan restaurants, I think, is to avoid the phony foods, like the phony hamburger, which is really made with God knows what. And it's mushy. I don't like mushy food. But if you order the actual vegetables, they also have a very good mac and cheese, but the vegetable things, which are what they say they are, not trying to be something else, it's very nice. So it's a fun place to have lunch. I recommend it. No, this is vegan. Vegetarian would have cheese, but not vegan. So it's on Wentworth Street, a very nice place. Chapter 11, Kashrut. So the first law of the kosher rules is given to Moses, to Noah. You can eat meat now, Noah. Since you helped to save the animals, you can eat meat. But you must pour out the blood on the ground. Don't eat the blood, because the blood symbolizes life. And you must remember that life belongs to me, to God. And I'm allowing you to eat meat now only because you saved the animals, and it's a concession to your nature. We have these pointy teeth that are made to tear flesh. So, all right, you can eat meat now, but you must pour out the blood. So they must be killed in a humane way. Kosher slaughter is at least allegedly more humane. You kill the animal with a very, very super sharp razor, which you draw across the throat so quickly the poor thing doesn't know it hit it. And then you hold up the carcass, you drain it out, you open it, and you flush it out with a hose. The blood must be removed. A kosher steak tastes like a regular steak. It doesn't matter, just the way the animal was killed. And you have the juices, but you don't have the actual blood. So that's the first rule of kashrut, and that was to Noah. Then it also says, about a half a dozen times in the 5 books of Moses, thou shalt not seethe a kid in its mother's milk. If you're going to kill a baby goat, at least don't add the indignity of boiling it in its own mother's milk. Have respect for the familial relationships in the animal kingdom. So it's reverence for life. That's what all this is about. And now here in chapter 11, you have the third aspect of kashrut, the forbidden animals, what you can eat and what you can't eat. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying to them, speak as follows to the Israelite people. These are the creatures you may eat from among all the land animals. Any animal that has true hoofs with clefts through the hoof and that chews the cud, such you may eat, so that a cow is fine. The following, however, of those that either chew the cud or have true hooves, but don't do both, you shall not eat. The camel. Verse 6, the hare, that is rabbit, can't eat that. Verse 7, the swine. Everyone knows the religious Jews don't eat pork. No rabbit. Verse 9. Well, it's a rodent. See. Verse 9. These you may eat of all that live in the water. It must have fins and scales. But anything, verse 10, in the seas or in the streams that have no fins and scales, among the swarming things of the water, that includes lobsters and crabs and shrimp, they are an abomination for you, at the end of verse 10. Let's see what the word is. Sheket's-haim, they are an abomination to you. Yes, no oysters, no clams.
We always sell the scallops. That was given
No scallops.
because they weren't close to a source of these things, and if they had been transported any distance without refrigeration, they might have been bad for you.
It's very interesting, the speculations as to why either God or the ancients developed this. In the 19th century, people were thinking in a very modern way, and they said, these are primitive health laws. And without refrigeration, eating pork can be very dangerous. You get, what is the disease? Trichinosis. So there are things people get from it. And also, I know people who have eaten bad oysters and clams and really become deathly ill. So, but yeah, that theory that it's health laws, I don't buy it, but it's a very popular theory. Because the Jews don't eat catfish, which lives in mud, but they do eat carp, which live in mud. So health-wise, it doesn't matter. I'm not sure they had the insight medically in those days to make these distinctions, but I think they're after something else. First of all, animals like the pig live a life which is pretty dirty. People striving for spiritual, if not perfection, at least high levels of spiritual life, wouldn't want to involve themselves with animals that eat the droppings of other animals. Lobsters are delicious. I remember them from before I was 20. I ate them. Not anymore. But they crawl along the floor of the sea, and they eat a lot of stuff you wouldn't want to know about. The fish that the Jews can eat live food or vegetable matter. The things they can't eat are often things that eat very unpleasant stuff. Also, the Bible likes to categorize things. We know what a fish is. We know what an animal is. What is a lobster? It's so strange looking that I think they couldn't find a place to put it, and it seemed to them that it straddled two categories. I mean, things that are amphibians, that live in the water and outside the water, Jews don't eat. They have to be carefully categorized as water or land animal. So who knows what the reasons are? We don't know. The reason I do it is that I was looking in college for a method of increasing my God consciousness. How can I would like to be able to think of God every minute of every day, but nobody can do that. So let us tie God consciousness, awareness of God, to some activity that we do frequently, and that if we do according to what we think is God's commandments, we will constantly have to be thinking about God. So whenever I go out with my friends for dinner, they're thinking about what they're in the mood to eat. I have to think about what God allows me to eat. What on this menu can I eat? I can't eat any meat unless it's a kosher restaurant. So I eat fish. Obviously can't have shellfish. And if I go to a kosher restaurant and have a hamburger, you certainly can't have a milkshake with it. It's one or the other. So you're constantly, whatever, I don't know what the origin of these laws is. Frankly, I don't know if these are from God or from a bunch of old elders, but whatever it is, the Jews have been doing it for 3,000 years. And that to me is a pretty good reason to do it. I want to be God conscious, and I want to be God conscious in a particularly Jewish way. And I was raised my family has been in America for like 7 generations. We had lost most of that Jewish consciousness. And many people in my family are Presbyterians. So I wanted to rediscover it, and therefore I wanted God, but I wanted God in a particularly Jewish way. And being kosher, I think, really has been very good for me. It keeps me, it's a spiritual discipline that directs my mind to God frequently throughout the day. And if I were a saint, I guess I wouldn't need it. I'd just automatically be that way. But I'm not, so I need the discipline. Yes, ma'am?
Mormons have a word of wisdom. We don't drink alcohol or something.
Exactly, just the same thing. Right.
It's easy to think in your mind, well, tea isn't going to hurt me, But I made a covenant that I
That's
won't
right.
drink it.
That's right.
And so I don't.
That's right.
And you can see the wisdom of it in the
I think so. I'm not going to drop dead if I have a lobster, and some part of me would love to have it. But, Moses Maimonides, the great medieval Jewish scholar, said, pork is the most delicious meat. That's why we can't eat it. Because we're not here to enjoy ourselves. We're here to serve God. Well,
I'm on a diet. People are like, I want to smell the bacon.
I eat fakin. Fakin is kosher beef fry. It looks just like bacon, but it's made from kosher beef. You fry it just like bacon. You make a fakin lettuce and tomato sandwich. No one knows the difference. Or you can take thin sliced kosher pastrami, which is a very fatty kind of smoked meat. Fry it, put it on your lettuce and tomato sandwich with mayonnaise. It tastes just like bacon, lettuce, and tomato. There's turkey bacon, but it's got to be kosher slaughtered. You see, that would be wonderful. I'd like to know where it is. I haven't seen it. I never saw it there, but I never saw it at Trader Joe. In any case, it's a good discipline for me. I can't eat, verse 13, the eagle, the vulture, the black vulture. Why? They're all predators. And you're not supposed to eat that kind of animal. The kite, the falcon, the raven, the ostrich, the nighthawk, the hawk, any kind of hawk. I can't eat a hoopoe, whatever that is. And I can't eat a bat, which I'm not tempted to do. But look at verse 22. You may eat locusts. Now it said John the Baptist ate locusts and honey. That may mean the locust plant, but it may also be actually locusts. See, if the Mormons had eaten those locusts, and the locusts, maybe not leave them all to the seagulls. Grasshoppers. Now I've eaten fried, very crispy crickets and ants. I don't think I could eat ants, but this is before I was kosher. They're very crunchy. I like crunchy things. So you can eat grasshoppers, etc. You can't, and now skip to verse 29. You can't eat the mole, the mouse, lizards, the gecko, that guy who's selling insurance on television, can't eat him. The crocodile, the lizard, and the chameleon. No. Absolutely not. So there it is. Who knows where it comes from? It says here it was dictated by God. I don't know if that's the case, but I do believe deeply that God cares if we do things for Him. And suppose you had a religion where it said every day at noon you should walk down the street patting your head and whistling Dixie and do it for God. That would be a sacred action if you believe that that was a way you were being conscious of God. So I don't think it really matters which discipline you choose in your life, as long as you pick some way of doing something to show God that you're serious. And certain rituals, I thought the Catholics were wrong to give up the Friday abstinence when they didn't eat meat on Friday, the day of when Christ shed His blood and gave His flesh for us. We're saying by not eating meat on Friday, the true blood and the true flesh are that of Christ, which redeems us. I thought that was a very powerful thing. And when they gave it up, it's not my business, but I think they made a mistake. So I think that dietary laws, such as the ones you all have, and ours are they're not the only way. You can pick another way. Prayer, daily prayer, of course, is important. But with the dietary law, you're praying by action, not just words. As you know, when I walk through my door in my house, I have these mezuzahs, these little boxes on the doorpost that have prayers in them. And I touch them and go like this: may the word of God enter my mouth, and may I become the living word of God. So it makes walking through a door an act of prayer. You sit down to a table and eat a kosher dinner, it's making the act of eating, the act of cooking, the act of shopping. Paul says, pray without ceasing. That's a great idea. Pray without ceasing. Rejoice in the Lord always, every day, in every way. So we can't do it in every way, but we can do it frequently. And to me, that's what the kosher laws are all about. I wonder, had I been raised with them, whether I would have fled from them. But I was raised totally without any religious observance, except going to synagogue twice a year and having a Passover Seder meal. That was our religion. And I yearned for a closer, for a closer walk with thee. And for me, this has worked very well. All right, that's the only part of Leviticus we're going to look at. We're going to pick up the text in Numbers, and we'll start. The beginning of Numbers is also very much about rituals, which won't be of interest to you. But we'll pick it up in chapter 10, verse 33. They marched from the mountain of the Lord into the wilderness. So you can see where this sentence should have followed on Exodus, where we left them as they left the Mount Sinai. And the priests of Israel in the Babylonian exile took their scissors, cut through the scroll, opened it up, and dropped down what is now the end of Exodus, all of Leviticus, and the beginning of Numbers, and all their ritual laws, which, as I say, are of interest to Orthodox Jews and of interest to scholars, but really not to this group. So we're just going to pick up the adventure story as they march on from Sinai, Numbers chapter 10, verse 33, next week. Thank you. Thank you.